At my promotion party, my mom laughed loud enough for the whole table to hear. "We're only here because your sister didn't have plans tonight." My dad smirked and said, "Don't get used to this attention. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." I just sat there, smiling quietly, because the next morning, every single one of them would wake up to a front-page photo and a group chat message that would change how they looked at me forever. I, 32 sat at the head of the long dining table at Morton's Steakhouse, watching my mother's face contort with that particular brand of cruel amusement she reserved especially for me. The entire table had gone quiet after her comment about only being there because my sister didn't have plans tonight. Her laughter echoed off the wood-paneled walls, and I felt 20 pairs of eyes shift between us, waiting for my reaction. My father added his own contribution, something about not getting used to this attention because it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. He had that smirk on his face, the one that said he'd just delivered what he considered a clever joke. A few cousins chuckled nervously. My aunt looked down at her plate. My younger brother scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging what had just happened. I smiled. Not a forced smile, not even a bitter one. A genuine smile that probably confused everyone at the table. Because in exactly 12 hours, everything would change. The promotion to Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian Technologies had been announced 3 weeks ago. At 32, I was the youngest person to ever hold the position at a company that employed over 15,000 people. The press release had gone out. The industry publications had picked it up. But my family hadn't noticed because they never did. I'd worked 16-hour days for 8 years to get here. Weekends didn't exist. Vacations were myths. While my sister was posting Instagram photos from Bali and Santorini, funded by our parents' endless generosity, I was in conference rooms negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. While my brother was dropping out of his third college major, I was presenting to the board of directors. My mother continued talking, something about how my sister had been invited to some exclusive art gallery opening, but had graciously declined to be here instead. The narrative was always the same. My sister was the star, the beauty, the one with potential. I was the worker bee, the boring one, the one who chose a corporate job instead of following my dreams. What they didn't know was that my dreams had never been small. The waiter brought out the main courses. My mother had ordered for my sister despite her not being present, as if keeping a seat warm for her at my own celebration. The empty chair next to me was a physical representation of how my family saw me. Always secondary, always in someone's shadow, always just barely worth showing up for. I thought about the manila envelope in my car. Inside were copies of bank statements, legal documents, and a very detailed timeline. I'd spent 3 years putting it together, working with a private investigator and a forensic accountant. The information inside that envelope would unravel my family's carefully constructed image like pulling a single thread from a sweater. My father asked me about the job responsibilities, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. He was checking his watch, probably calculating how soon he could leave. My mother was texting someone under the table. My brother yawned openly. My uncle was talking to his wife about their upcoming cruise. None of them had asked about the actual work I'd be doing, the teams I'd be leading, or what this meant for my career. That was fine. They'd learn soon enough. I discovered the discrepancies 2.5 years ago, purely by accident. My grandmother had passed away, and I was helping my parents sort through her financial documents. That's when I noticed the trust fund she'd established, the one that was supposed to be divided equally among her 3 grandchildren. The one that somehow only had 2 beneficiaries listed. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern I should have seen coming. Every inheritance, every family investment, every opportunity had been carefully redirected away from me and toward my siblings. My parents had systematically removed me from my grandmother's will, forged documents, and pocketed nearly $800,000 that should have been mine. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was discovering that my sister's art gallery, the one my parents bragged about at every family gathering, had been funded entirely with my inheritance money. The business they claimed she'd built from the ground up with her creativity and passion was actually built with stolen funds. My brother's apartment, his car, his lifestyle while he bounced between majors, all funded by money that was legally mine. I took a bite of my steak. It was perfectly cooked, medium rare, exactly as I'd ordered. I wondered if this would be the last meal I'd ever share with these people. My mother made another comment about how nice it was that my company did these little celebrations for middle management. I didn't bother correcting her about my actual position. The press conference was scheduled for 9 the next morning. By 9:15, my face would be on the front page of the business section in the Times, alongside the announcement of the largest technology merger in the industry's history. A merger I'd personally orchestrated, bringing together 3 competing firms under the Meridian umbrella. A deal worth $3.7 billion. My phone buzzed with a message from my attorney. Everything was ready. The lawsuit would be filed at 8 in the morning, 1 hour before the press conference. The timing was deliberate. The local news stations had already been tipped off about a major story involving a prominent local family and financial fraud. They just didn't know which family yet. I'd also prepared a detailed message for the family group chat, the one where my siblings shared their adventures and my parents showered them with praise while my accomplishments went unmentioned. The message included links to court documents, copies of the forged paperwork, bank records showing the transfer of my inheritance funds, and a very calm explanation of what would be happening over the next few weeks. My cousin asked me something about whether I was seeing anyone. I told her I'd been too focused on work for dating. This was met with the expected response from my mother about how I needed to find balance, how my sister had managed to build a business and maintain a social life, how I should take notes from her example. I smiled and nodded. The dessert arrived. Chocolate lava cake for the table. My father made a toast about family being the most important thing, about how proud they were of all their children. Several people raised their glasses. I raised mine too, taking a small sip of wine while watching their faces, memorizing this moment. Because tomorrow, when they woke up to the news alerts and the legal notifications and the message in the group chat, these faces would look very different. I'd given them chances. 3 years worth of chances. I could have filed the lawsuit immediately after discovering the fraud. Instead, I'd waited. I'd documented everything. I'd gathered irrefutable evidence. And I'd hoped, naively perhaps, that someone would notice me. That someone would acknowledge what I'd accomplished without their help or their money. That someone would look at me and see value beyond being the family's workhorse. Tonight had been the final test. My promotion to SVP was significant enough that even my willfully ignorant family should have recognized it. If they'd shown up with genuine pride, if they'd asked real questions, if they'd treated this dinner as an actual celebration rather than an obligation they were suffering through, I might have reconsidered. But my mother's comment about only being here because my sister didn't have plans had sealed it. That one sentence had crystallized everything I already knew. I would never matter to these people. Not unless I made myself impossible to ignore. The dinner wound down. People started gathering their coats and bags. My mother kissed my cheek with the same warmth she might show a distant acquaintance. My father shook my hand and told me to keep up the good work. My brother left without saying goodbye. Various aunts and uncles and cousins filtered out, thanking me for the meal, but already moving on to whatever came next in their lives. I stood in the parking lot and watched their cars pull away. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my attorney, confirming that the process server had the addresses and would deliver the lawsuit papers to my parents and siblings by 7 in the morning. That gave them just enough time to read through the documents before the news broke. The group chat message was scheduled to send at 8:30, right in that chaotic window when they'd be panicking, but before they could effectively organize a response. The message was calm and factual. It laid out the timeline of discovery, the evidence I'd gathered, the legal grounds for the lawsuit, and my intention to recover every cent of my stolen inheritance plus damages. It also included a brief note about the press conference at 9, with a link to the live stream. I debated whether to include one final paragraph, something about how they'd made me feel invisible my entire life, and now they wouldn't be able to look away. But I deleted it. The facts would speak loudly enough. Driving home, I thought about what the next few months would look like. The lawsuit would be public and ugly. My parents would likely try to paint me as ungrateful or greedy. My siblings would play the victim card. Extended family would take sides. Some relationships would be permanently destroyed. But I'd run the calculations. The settlement, even if it came in lower than my full claim, would be substantial. More importantly, the public nature of the case would ensure accountability. My sister's gallery would be investigated for its funding sources. My parents' reputation in their social circles would be shredded, and I would finally, definitively, establish that I wasn't someone who could be overlooked or dismissed. The apartment was quiet when I got home. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone showed the scheduled messages queued up and ready to send. The legal documents were filed electronically and set to process first thing in the morning. The press conference materials were finalized. Every piece was in place. I thought about calling it off. For maybe 30 seconds, I considered deleting everything and walking away, taking the high road, being the bigger person. Then I remembered my mother's laugh at the dinner table. That casual cruelty, delivered in front of everyone, on what should have been my night. I remembered my father's smirk. I remembered 20 years of being second best, of having my achievements minimized, of watching my siblings coast on stolen money while I built everything myself from nothing. No, they'd made their choices. Now they'd live with the consequences. I went to bed early, knowing I'd need to be sharp for the press conference. Sleep came surprisingly easily. No guilt, no second thoughts. Just a calm certainty that I was doing what needed to be done. Update 1. My alarm went off at 6. I'd set multiple backups, but I needn't have bothered. I was wide awake, energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. The first message came at 7:03. My phone started buzzing and didn't stop. Calls, texts, voicemails, all flooding in at once. I'd anticipated this and had set my phone to do not disturb for everyone except my attorney and my assistant. Everyone else could wait. My attorney called at 7:15 to confirm the process server had successfully delivered the lawsuit papers to all parties. My parents had been served at their home, my sister at her apartment, my brother at his place. All of them now had legal documentation detailing exactly what I knew and what I intended to do about it. At 7:30, my assistant sent me a message that local news vans were parked outside my parents' house. Someone had tipped them off about the lawsuit. I knew who that someone was. My attorney had contacts at every major outlet in the city. The story was too good for them to ignore. Prominent family, financial fraud, stolen inheritance, all coming to light on the same day the youngest victim was being celebrated in the business press. The group chat message sent at 8:30 is scheduled. I checked it briefly. The chat had exploded with confusion and panic. My mother had sent a series of increasingly frantic messages demanding I call her immediately. My father had written that this was all a misunderstanding and we needed to talk as a family. My sister was claiming she'd known nothing about the funding sources for her gallery. My brother hadn't responded at all. I muted the chat and got ready for the press conference. The company had arranged for a car to pick me up at 8:15. During the drive, I scrolled through news alerts on my tablet. The story was already breaking. Local outlets had picked up on the lawsuit filing and were connecting it to the Meridian press conference. Financial reporters were putting together the pieces, realizing that the same person at the center of a major industry merger was also involved in a dramatic family legal battle. My phone showed 73 missed calls. I didn't check any of them. The press conference was held at Meridian's downtown headquarters, in the large auditorium we used for major announcements. I arrived to find the room packed with journalists, industry analysts, and company executives. The CEO met me backstage and asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed given the personal situation that had just become public. I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. At 9 sharp, we walked onto the stage. The CEO made the formal announcement of the merger, walking through the business rationale and the strategic vision. Then he introduced me as the lead architect of the deal, the youngest SVP in company history, and the person who would be overseeing the integration of all 3 companies. When I stepped to the podium, the camera flashes were blinding. I delivered my prepared remarks about the merger, the synergies we expected to achieve, and the transformation this would bring to the industry. I spoke for 12 minutes, answering technical questions with the precision I'd built my career on. Then a reporter from the local news station raised her hand and asked about the lawsuit I'd filed that morning against my family. The room went silent. Every camera swung toward me. I'd prepared for this question. My attorney had advised me to decline to comment on pending litigation. But I decided days ago that I would answer, once, clearly, and then move on. I explained that I'd recently discovered financial irregularities related to family inheritances and had taken appropriate legal action to recover funds that were rightfully mine. I stated that the matter would be handled through the court system and I wouldn't be discussing it further out of respect for that process. Then I pivoted back to the business discussion and didn't take any more personal questions. The press conference wrapped at 9:45. The CEO pulled me aside afterward and told me he respected how I'd handled it. Other executives congratulated me. several mentioning that they'd had their own difficult family situations and understood what I was going through. A few board members made a point of stopping by to shake my hand. By 10 o'clock, my face was on the front page of the Times business section, the Journal, and 3 local papers. The headlines all focused on the merger, but the secondary stories about the family lawsuit were gaining traction fast. Social media was exploding with takes on both stories, with most people connecting the dots and expressing support for someone standing up to family fraud. My phone continued buzzing with ignored calls and messages. At 10:30, my attorney called with an update. My parents' lawyer had already reached out requesting a meeting to discuss settlement terms. That had been faster than expected. Apparently, the public attention was making them eager to resolve things quietly. I told my attorney to decline the meeting request and proceed with discovery. If they wanted to settle, they could make a formal offer through proper channels, but I wasn't interested in backroom negotiations designed to make this go away. They'd stolen from me, lied about it, and continued to diminish me even after I'd built a successful career without their help. They didn't get to control the timeline now. Update 2. The next 72 hours were surreal. The merger story dominated business news, while the family lawsuit became a viral topic on social media. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with messages of support. Former colleagues sent congratulations. Industry contacts requested coffee meetings. My family's messages grew more desperate. My mother left voicemails crying and claiming she didn't understand what was happening. My father's tone shifted from dismissive to angry to pleading. My sister posted a long Instagram story about being blindsided and asking for privacy. My brother finally responded in the group chat with a single message asking how much it would take to make this go away. That message told me everything I needed to know. Even now, even with all the evidence laid out in legal documents and news reports, they viewed this as something that could be solved with money changing hands quietly. They still didn't understand that this wasn't about the money anymore. Extended family members started taking sides. Some reached out to me privately, admitting they'd always suspected something was wrong with how my parents treated me differently. Others defended my parents, claiming I was being vindictive and destroying the family over a misunderstanding. Several cousins stopped following me on social media. My aunt sent a long email about forgiveness and moving forward. I didn't respond to any of them. My attorney had advised me to maintain strict silence on all personal communications until the case progressed further. Besides, I had nothing more to say. I'd said everything that mattered in the legal filing. Work became a welcome refuge. The merger integration required 18-hour days, complex negotiations, and constant problem solving. It was exactly what I needed. My colleagues treated me normally, focusing on the business challenges rather than the family drama. The CEO made it clear that my personal situation wouldn't affect my position as long as I continued performing at the level he expected. I continued performing. The first integration phase wrapped ahead of schedule. The board approved the detailed timeline I'd presented. Industry analysts published favorable coverage of the merger strategy. My professional reputation was growing stronger even as my family relationships disintegrated. 2 weeks after the press conference, my parents' attorney made a settlement offer. It was for 60% of what I was claiming, with conditions requiring confidentiality and a public statement from me claiming the lawsuit had been based on misunderstandings now resolved. I rejected it within an hour. My attorney filed for full discovery, requesting all financial records, emails, and documents related to my grandmother's estate and the various trust funds. My parents tried to block it. The judge denied their motion and ordered them to comply. That's when things started moving faster. The forensic accountant I'd hired found additional irregularities beyond what I'd originally discovered. Apparently, the inheritance theft had been going on longer than I'd known, extending back to a trust fund from my grandfather that I'd been removed from as well. The total amount grew from $800,000 to nearly $1.2 million. My sister's gallery came under scrutiny from the local arts council after someone tipped them off about questionable funding sources. Her business license was suspended pending an investigation. She posted angry messages blaming me for destroying her dreams, but carefully avoided admitting any knowledge of where her startup capital had come from. My brother withdrew from his current university program and moved back in with my parents. According to mutual acquaintances, he'd been cut off financially and didn't know how to function without their support. Part of me felt bad for him. He was more a passive beneficiary than an active participant in the fraud, but he'd also sat there at that dinner and said nothing while they humiliated me. He'd made his choice. 3 weeks after filing, my parents' attorney requested a mediation session. This time the offer was for 85% of the total claim, with fewer confidentiality conditions. My attorney advised me that it was a strong offer and would avoid the uncertainty and expense of a trial. I asked for the weekend to think about it. I spent that Saturday at my office, looking out at the city and thinking about what I wanted the endgame to be. The money mattered, of course. 800,000 or 1.2 million or whatever the final number ended up being would be recovered. But that had never been the real point. The real point was that they'd seen me now. Everyone had seen me. The invisible son, the overlooked sibling, the person who'd been treated as an afterthought for 32 years had made himself impossible to ignore. My face had been on the front page. My name was attached to the biggest merger in industry history. My family's fraud had been exposed publicly, and they'd face consequences whether I settled or not. I'd won. The question was whether I needed to grind them into dust to prove it, or whether making them acknowledge what they'd done was victory enough. On Monday morning, I told my attorney to counter their offer. 95% of the full claim, including the newly discovered funds, written apologies from each family member admitting to the fraud and their role in it, and full reimbursement of all legal fees. No confidentiality clause. They didn't get to hide what they'd done. Take it or see them in court. They took it. Update 3. The settlement was finalized 6 weeks after I'd filed the lawsuit. My parents paid $1.14 million plus my legal fees, which came to another $130,000. My sister provided a written statement acknowledging that her gallery had been funded with money stolen from my inheritance. My brother wrote a shorter apology admitting he'd known the family treated me unfairly and had chosen to benefit from it rather than speak up. My mother's letter was 3 pages long, full of justifications and excuses wrapped in language about how they'd always loved all their children equally and had made mistakes in judgment but never meant to hurt me. It was worthless except as a legal document. My father's letter was 2 sentences. I acknowledge the financial irregularities described in the lawsuit. I apologize for my role in these events. Even in apology, he couldn't bring himself to actually admit what he'd done. I had the letters framed and hung them in my home office, right next to the front-page article about the merger, a reminder of what I'd accomplished and what it had cost. The money hit my account on a Wednesday. I stared at the balance for a long time. $1.27 million, recovered from people who'd stolen it and spent it and never thought I'd be smart enough or strong enough to take it back. I donated $200,000 to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing business degrees. The rest went into investments managed by a financial advisor who wasn't related to me by blood or marriage. My sister's gallery never reopened. The investigation found that she'd commingled personal and business funds in ways that violated multiple regulations, and her reputation in the local arts community was destroyed. She moved to another state and deleted her social media accounts. My brother eventually got a job in restaurant management, working his way up from host to assistant manager. According to mutual acquaintances, he's actually good at it. We don't speak, but I've heard he tells people he deserved what happened and is building something for himself now. I hope that's true. My parents stayed in their house, but withdrew from most social activities. Their friends knew what had happened. The country club they'd belonged to for 20 years quietly suggested they consider not renewing their membership. They declined to attend my uncle's birthday party when they learned I'd be there. I received a handful of messages from extended family members over the following months. Some apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner. Some tried to play mediator, suggesting that enough time had passed and families should forgive. Some simply wanted to know if I was okay. I responded to the first group with brief thanks. I ignored the second group entirely. To the third group, I said I was better than okay. Because I was. The weight I'd been carrying for 32 years, the weight of never being enough and never understanding why, was gone. I knew exactly why now. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. It was about people who decided I was less valuable than my siblings and had built a system to reflect that belief. The merger integration was completed 4 months after the settlement. We brought 3 companies together ahead of schedule and under budget, creating one of the largest technology operations firms in the country. The success earned me another promotion and a seat on the executive leadership team at 33. I bought a house in the hills with a view of the city. I started dating someone I met through work, someone who knew my story and didn't judge me for any of it. I took my first real vacation in 9 years, 2 weeks in Japan with no laptop and no email access. I built the life I wanted, using money I'd earned and money I'd recovered, without owing anything to anyone. My mother sent a Christmas card that first year. Inside was a note saying she missed me and hoped we could talk someday. I threw it away without responding. My father sent nothing. My sister sent a brief email on my birthday asking if there was any path to reconciliation. I replied with a single word, no. My brother sent a friend request on social media that I left pending indefinitely. I didn't hate them. Hate requires emotional energy I wasn't willing to spend. I simply didn't have room for them in my life anymore. They'd shown me who they were, and I'd shown them who I was. The relationship was complete. Sometimes I think about that dinner at Morton's Steakhouse. My mother's laugh, my father's smirk, the empty chair where my sister should have been, the family's complete indifference to my achievement. I think about how I sat there smiling, knowing what was coming. That smile wasn't cruel or vengeful. It was relief. Relief that I'd finally given myself permission to stop trying to earn love from people who'd never intended to give it. Relief that I'd found a way to reclaim not just my money, but my dignity. The revenge wasn't the lawsuit or the public exposure or the settlement. The revenge was succeeding spectacularly without them, proving that everything I'd built had come from my own work, and forcing them to watch from the outside while I lived a life they could no longer diminish. I'm 34 now, Senior Vice President of Operations at one of the largest tech firms in the country, owner of a beautiful home, in a healthy relationship, financially secure with money I earned and money I recovered. And every morning when I wake up, I remember that I'm not invisible anymore. I never was. I just needed to stop waiting for the wrong people to notice.